What is the secret to making a modern football club gel, which is what you've achieved at West Ham?
Well, I think we need everybody on the same page, but commitment, I think, is one. I think everybody needs to be committed and going to help you, and you don't need it broken. And let's be fair, if you're talking about West Ham in general, for many years it's looked that way. I've found it really good to work with. I've found that everybody's pulled together, all going the same direction. But sometimes you need good bits of fortune, you need bits of luck. I always remember even when I first got my job at Everton, I remember Walter Smith saying to me, he says, "You're going to be really lucky." And I'd taken over from Walter. He says, as a young boy in the academy, he says he's going to be a great player. And you think, "Oh, never see him in my time." And it happened to be Wayne Rooney. And things like that actually can help you personally, can help the club, gives the club more profile. We're a little bit like that at West Ham at the moment. We've got Declan Rice, who's an outstanding English international, and he's helping the club and helping us all at the moment. And I think trying to make West Ham, I'm going to say more popular, but certainly I think West Ham have become a club with team that people actually quite like watching because they've seen a lot of good things in the last year or two.
So when you say commitment, what does that look like?
Well, I think the commitment for me is that the players are going to be part of that as well. I mentioned the staff. I think the staff, but I need the players to buy into how we work, what we try and do. And sometimes that's not easy. This was my second time at West Ham. I'd been there before, and actually felt we had done enough to retain the job the first time, but we didn't. So coming back, I had to think deeply: was I going to get the players on my side? But by all accounts, the players were really keen on me coming back, and that gave me a start. And I think sometimes, as I said, you need a little bit of help and things to go well for you for it to work. I think we see lots of clubs which are not committed behind their managers or their coaches, and I think they're the clubs which tend to find that things don't go well.
So we have lots of non-football people that listen to this.
Yes,
Lots of business leaders, lots of teachers, and they're all doing a very similar job to you, really. They're getting a group of people and trying to get them to believe in a common aim. So let's take this most recent iteration of West Ham for you. When you went back in, do you remember what the sort of first thing you did or said to the players was, which may well give people outside of the game an indication of what they can do with their teams to get people on side?
I had told them that I'd watched the games and I thought that they hadn't performed well, and I showed them, and I used it in I had the video of the games. I'd watched a few of the games, and I showed them, and I said, "This is nothing like we're going to play, and this is nothing like will be acceptable." There was lots of incidents where players weren't running back, players were out of position, and that's no criticism of any other manager or any other coach. So that was the way I decided to go. But I think that the leadership I took, or the way I saw that being then, was that this was the way I wanted it to be done. I had to do it really quickly. We'd short amount of games, or we could have been relegated. What was going to happen? And also, I was coming back from a situation where people were probably saying, "Oh, David Moyes coming back, not too sure about that. How's he going to react?" And he's been here before, and maybe some people were seeing there's been some jobs that haven't worked for me. So I had that to deal with as well. But I decided if I was going to go, I had to go full on. And I see leadership coming in lots of different forms. I don't think leadership is one way you do leadership. I think everybody does their own type of leadership, and mine was to sort of probably dig the players out right away. There's things I could look at. We were, for example, physically, West Ham were really poor in the physical stats. And I think when you're not doing well, you want to think that your supporters want to think that their players are committed, they're working hard, they're doing everything they can, they're committed. And then when you look and say, well, actually, you're bottom of the physical stats for distance ran, you don't make many sprints, all those things would go with it. So in many ways, for a coach or a manager, these can be quick wins.
Yeah.
But you still have to try and get the players to do it.
And what did you also do to provide some sort of psychological safety to those players? Because I can see that going in and going, not good, not good, not good, do this better. They understand the levels you want to operate at. But then comes the moment where you need to bring them on side, right? So how do you go about letting them know that's not good enough? but then comes the arm around the shoulder, if you like.
Well, the practice and the compliments and the encouragement. And I think I felt practices which would make them feel good. And strangely enough, players running hard and getting cheered. And I make a sort of, I'll tell you this a little bit. 2 years ago, for the people who do understand football, was we had Marko Arnautovic at West Ham, who was not particularly liked by the supporters, didn't do well. I remember saying to Marco, I says, it's strange football, if you run around and you close down and you chase people, the supporters cheer you. And I used to always say, if I was a centre forward, all I would do was run hard and make the supporters think, because I'd get a cheer, they'd be pleased with me. And really, all players want to be acknowledged and want to be, think that they're doing a good job. Marco started running, chasing people down, started to win a few balls back and got the plaudits for it. Also, he had the technical ability. So that is one of the examples where I think actually, sometimes to make it simple and say, well, why don't you just run a bit harder? Why don't you try and show people that you do care, you are committed? And I think that was probably the level we started. And it was probably, there's nothing clever about it, but it was a base level where I felt if we started there, then we could see where we could go.
See, there's a phrase that you use there, David, that really fascinates as well, that you spoke about at practice as opposed to at training. So would you tell me about how you create that environment at the clubs you go into where people can practice and learn rather than just train to get fit?
Well, as I've gone on probably and more experience, I've started to look to find out what's changing. And part of being my periods where I've been out of work, I've tried to retrain myself a little bit. So I worked for UEFA, for example, and I would go to the games and we were studying, where are the goals getting scored, how are they getting conceded, So things are brought back, but I also found that I see a change in the training of the players now. We train as a group, you're a team, but I see much more individual work. I see much more group work. So I think since I've come back, I've tried to introduce much more group work, individual work, specific on the person or the unit. More unit meetings, less long meetings. Try to, personally, if I just added a word onto it, then is possibly trying to be much, much more positive than I'd been in the past, because I felt as if I was going into a job now, I'm saying, I'm fed up being sort of, not negative, but being down on myself, because every game in this business is a hard one to win, and you can hardly smile because you've got another difficult game round the corner. But I just changed my mind and said, I'm going to be positive, I'm going to pass it on to the players, and we're going to try and be attractive as much as we can. We're going to try and get to a stage where we're a much more attractive looking team.